What do you do when you discover someone who plays better guitar at 10 years old than you did at 18? Well, one thing you can do is stop complaining about big fretboard stretches.
大人用のギターですから、それだけギターが弾きにくいと思いますか？
そこまではもう。
This is Lisa X, internet guitar phenomenon whose YouTube covers of rock guitar classics have racked up impressive view counts. And that's Marty Friedman, who graciously offered both his guitaristic and linguistic superpowers,
こんだけ10歳でこんだけ弾けるなんて
along with a healthy dollop of charm,
超羨ましいんですよ、僕は。
in the service of understanding Lisa's ahead-of-the-curve guitar skills.
全然できそうじゃん、ほら。
And what we discovered was pretty cool. Cross-picking, the distinctively curved trajectory of Lisa's pick strokes, lets her do two things at once. For starters, it's an alternate picking technique, a way of moving the pick back and forth in the familiar sequence of downstrokes and upstrokes. But it's also a string switching movement. The way her pick strokes launch up into the air like this lets her move to a new string without hitting any of the others. This allows her to tackle tricky phrases like this repeating triad. This is a common way to play a three-note arpeggio on the guitar because the left hand doesn't have to stretch more than 4 frets. But repeating it like Lisa is doing causes the picking sequence to flip-flop with each repetition. The first repetition starts on a downstroke, then the second starts on an upstroke, and so on. Not only is this tricky to coordinate, a little like walking and chewing gum, but the real challenge here is what it does to the string switching. The phrase moves from outside picking on the first repetition to inside picking on the second, and back to outside again on the third. And a lot of players find this quite awkward to do. In fact, Marty himself devised a different solution to this problem. Here, he's using a combination of sweeping and alternate picking, along with his famously recognizable flexed wrist approach to downward pick slant. The advantage of Marty's approach is that it solves the flip-flopping and causes the picking to start with a downstroke on every repetition. Now, you might think this kind of economizing on pick strokes would be obvious, but it really isn't, because it actually depends on this downward pick slanting orientation in order to work. And not everybody holds the pick this way, and if you don't, the sweeping won't flow as smoothly in the ascending direction. And even more critically, the upstroke won't jump up in the air like this. Look at that pick height. It's that height that allows Marty to connect smoothly back to the beginning of the pattern just by playing a downstroke. These two abilities, the ability to sweep smoothly to a higher string, and the ability to cause upstrokes to rise up into the air just through the motion of alternate picking, those are what downward pick slanting does. It's a very powerful string switching technique used by many elite players for precisely these two reasons. Without it, you would be much less likely to stumble across the solution that Marty has devised here. So Marty's use of downward pick slanting is really part of a whole system, almost like a physical language. In fact, even though Marty spoke mostly Japanese, I could tell we really connected on a mechanical level.
何言ってるかさっぱりわかんない、実は。
Lisa's solution is different, involving a streamlined form of alternate picking. But like Marty, it is her knack for physical problem solving that led her to it. Here, her cross-picking motion lets her tackle even tortuously twisted phrases like the head to Guthrie Govan's Rhode Island Shred. At these higher speeds, Lisa's picking motion flattens out, and this is really powerful because it lets her go faster with less effort. It's also more dangerous because the shallowness of the cross-picking curve at these speeds sometimes causes her to hit other strings. The challenge for Lisa is figuring out how to have just enough of this curvature that she can get over the strings without hitting them, but not so much that it becomes physically awkward. And it's clear that she already gets this, because when we gave her specific instructions to play with more precision, her attack became louder and more confident, and the precision went right back up. Tricky John Petrucci tritone phrases, scales in both directions, and even some of Marty's signature string-skipping arpeggios.
She learns fast.
Played Lisa style with pure alternate picking.
もう全部ピックしてみてください。
But some people might still be thinking, yeah, well, let's see her play a solo with real emotion. But these kind of comments are ridiculous and unfair, and all it takes is one look at Marty's effortless rapport with Lisa to know that he totally gets what high-performing kids are really about. The term prodigy is thrown around loosely all the time as a way of indicating how awesome someone is. But according to Ellen Winter, chair of the psychology department at Boston College, prodigy actually has a surprisingly cut-and-dried definition in research circles.
Prodigy is typically defined as somebody who does something at an adult level under the age of around 10.
So that's it. A prodigy is simply a kid performing at the level of adults. When it comes to famous musicians performing like adults, the musical hero most closely associated with prodigious ability is probably Mozart. As a kid, Mozart was trotted around to the courts of Europe performing feats of musical derring-do, like keyboard shredding with a cloth draped over his hands, or detecting minute tuning differences in the violins of much more experienced players. Mozart would eventually graduate from the circus act to make historically important musical contributions, and given his outsized ability at such a young age, this would seem to make sense. But interestingly, not all prodigies are destined for future greatness.
It could well be that there are plenty of people that have the ability but don't have the compulsion, and we never hear about them because they never go anywhere.
And on the flip side, there are probably lots of awesome musicians who didn't even do music when they were under the age of 10.
僕はなんか10歳で何もできなかったんですよ。宿題でもできなかったんですよ。
So technically, we'd never actually know if they were or weren't prodigies. Well, we do know that Marty developed his distinctive hand position very early on. This angle here, when you rotate the hand down.
It just evolved, and I never really even thought about it. And then I saw this old video, like I was 16 or something, 15, and I was doing it back then. So I never thought about it.
And then went on to write truckloads of incredible riffs, and wrote and played on some of the most lauded metal albums of all time. And that's the point. The term prodigy is not a rating of someone's ability to do amazing things in life. Like, if you're not a prodigy, that's it, go home, you're toast. Instead, it's really just a technical designation, a set of criteria that researchers use to identify rare occurrences of early developing adult-level abilities. And those criteria are actually pretty simple.
I just say anybody that does something very, very well at a very young age and seems to learn on their own and has a rage to master. By rage to master, I mean an extremely intense motivation to work on getting better in the area in which you are gifted.
Number 1, obsessive motivation, what Ellen calls the rage to master. Such a great term. When you see a high-performing kid, it's tempting to think that the parents must be some kind of taskmasters who created a little monster. But according to Ellen, it's not the parents at all who are driving their kids to prodigious heights.
I don't think that's true, because you cannot take a typical child and force that child to work 8 hours a day on their guitar. They're going to rebel. They're not going to do it. You work on something that you can master, that comes easily to you, where you can advance.
So it's high-performing kids who are much more likely to be the ones pushing their parents. Why do we think they are compelled in this way, though?
That is the million-dollar question. I think it's innate. I think people who have a very high ability in some area also have an intense drive to master that area. I think they go together.
Even if it's driving their parents crazy.
And I'm just jamming down there, and my parents were hating it because you could crank the stereo as loud as you want. But as soon as I started, Michael!
But motivation alone is not enough, because criterion number 2, which Mike also possesses in large quantities, is actual skill. We like to think of Thomas Edison's famous quote about genius being 1% inspiration and 99% perspiration. But it turns out this may overstate the role that dedication plays in developing great ability.
I wouldn't deny the importance of work, and there are psychologists who believe that it's all a matter of hard work, practice. There was a case that I illustrated in my book, Gifted Children, of a child who was compelled to draw trains. And he just drew them thousands and thousands of trains as he was growing up. And the interesting thing is they get somewhat better, but they're not prodigy level. So we don't really know why he was so compelled to draw them. The point that I use that for is just to say that hard work will get you somewhere, but it won't get you everywhere without that intense, well, he had the intense drive, but without the innate talent.
You may notice that one thing notably missing from the qualifications and abilities of prodigies is originality. The central skill of child prodigies is largely imitative in nature, doing the same things that adults already do, just younger. Whether or not those things are novel or unique doesn't really enter into it. Researchers who study high-performing children like to talk about different kinds of creativity. There's little c creativity, sometimes called everyday creativity. This is originality within established parameters, like Mozart writing a clearly precocious but not otherwise revolutionary minuet at age 5. Or, for that matter, average adult-level originality involved in any creative profession, like writing or computer programming. Prodigies sometimes, but not always, demonstrate this kind of little c creativity, because it's an extension of their advanced facility with rules and their manipulation. Then there's big C creativity. These are the benchmarks of human cultural achievement. Think of the breakthroughs of Newton and Einstein, or artistic milestones like Michelangelo's David or Beethoven's symphonies. When it comes to big C creativity, it turns out that no child prodigy, not even absurdly skilled wunderkinds like Mozart, has ever made a big C creative contribution, even if they eventually went on to do so later in life. And if you think about it, this makes sense. Little c creativity involves learning a set of rules and then demonstrating facility within them. This is the kind of thing a smart person can do in an afternoon if the rules are simple enough, or in a few years if the rules are more complicated. But big C creativity entails all of that, plus internalizing everything that's ever been done in a particular field, and then stepping outside it. And no matter how smart you are, this kind of familiarity simply takes time. Einstein believed that if you hadn't made your big breakthrough by age 30, it just wasn't going to happen. And this was mostly true for his time period, when the mavericks of quantum physics made major contributions while still in their 20s. But as the pile of human knowledge has grown, the time it takes to learn it all has also grown. The age when the average Nobel recipient makes their big breakthrough has been growing right along with it, and currently stands in the late 40s. Even before that, some of humankind's biggest achievements were notched by the silver-haired. Darwin didn't publish The Origin of Species until he was 50. Brahms continued to write masterpieces into his late 50s even after he promised to retire. And the Colonel didn't go public with The Secret Recipe until he was 65. So what does this all mean? If you're a grown-up and watching videos of talents like Lisa makes you want to hang up your guitar for good, don't. It is precisely your worldly experience that gives you the edge in creating something wondrous that the rest of us will love listening to. And if you're a newcomer like Lisa, don't worry if you haven't yet written your Tornado of Souls. You've got plenty of time to pen your masterpiece, and you can be sure that the rest of us will be looking forward to it.